I can't believe I'm finally making this video. I am super excited. In this video, I'll tell you how I was able to relocate to 2 different European cities from Egypt as a software engineer in the last 4 years. Hello friends and welcome back. My name is Ahmed Atifi and I've been a software engineer for the past 6 or 7 years, as many of you might already know. And over the last 4 years, I've managed to relocate to Portugal from Egypt for a role as a software engineer. And then from Portugal, I relocated again to Vienna, Austria for another role also as a software engineer. And today we'll be chatting about what the process was like. Now, before we get into it, let me address this and get it out of the way first. I do not have a European passport, and unfortunately, my Egyptian passport doesn't grant me free access to Europe, so I did actually have to go through the process of acquiring a visa both times. Since I've personally done it twice, I don't think it's impossible or a crazy thing to do, but I do think that it requires some work, effort, and time to make it happen, which shouldn't really be a problem if that's something that you really want to do, like I did at the time. So without further ado, let's dive right in. I'll be talking about this purely from an anecdotal perspective and what I wanted to do at the time, which was to work and to live in Europe. We will discuss the work permit in details in the next section. What you need to know is to get a work permit that will allow you to live and work in a European country, you first will need to have a standing job offer from the company and means of sustenance. Means of sustenance is basically either any savings you already have or the promise of a salary that exceeds the minimum monthly salary put by the government or the immigration entity as a requirement or a prerequisite for a residence or work permit to be issued for you. If you're like me, then you're probably doing this move with like 0 savings in the bank, which is basically where I was at when I was doing this move. But don't worry. For the most part, tech companies offer good enough above average salaries that will probably cover the sustenance parts for you. And so the only thing you will actually need to worry about is getting a job offer. I've made a more detailed video already on how to prepare for interviews and how I got my dream job and so on. So if you want to check it out, I'll link it somewhere like either up here or either up here. So check it out if you want. But I will still go high level with you on how you can get a software engineering role abroad. In my opinion, there are 3 main requirements that you will need to have for you to become a viable software engineering candidate for tech companies in Europe. These 3 requirements are English language skills, technical skills, people skills, and culture fit. Let's talk about the English language first. If I'm being completely honest with you, if you don't have at least a conversational level of English or at least speak the language of the country that you want to move to, your English language skills might be your biggest obstacle at the moment, and you should probably work at that first. You might, and I underline might, be able to get away with not speaking English if you speak the language of the country that you want to move to proficiently. For example, if you're planning to go to like Portugal and you speak Portuguese proficiently, you might be able to get away with not speaking English. However, with a caveat, let me explain the reasoning behind what I'm saying. Companies that are willing to hire candidates from abroad are usually companies that tend to want to foster like this international and a diverse culture, and usually English happens to be the official speaking language in many of those companies so that they're able to accommodate as many international people as possible, given that English is the most spoken language in the world. Even though some companies might not state that requirement explicitly, it is sort of an unspoken rule, and in actually many cases it is actually a spoken rule. Now, sometimes you can get away without speaking English if you speak the language of the country proficiently. And if the company happens to be hiring from abroad and is looking for engineers that will work with mostly native speakers. These companies actually do exist. But I don't think, in my opinion, that they're very common, and I think the most common case is that if companies are willing to hire from abroad, then they're willing to adopt English as the most spoken language in the company. I have heard of companies here in Austria that expect engineers to communicate in German, even if they're international like candidates, and those companies might be willing to hire exceptional candidates from abroad if those candidates can prove that they can speak German proficiently. But in all fairness, I think these are outliers. Usually if a company in Austria, for example, wants to hire a German-speaking engineer, they'll probably start looking within Austria and Germany first before even considering to look outside that area. On the other hand, acquiring English proficiency will open up way too many doors for you when you're looking for a role, which is why I really think that if you don't already have at least a conversational level of English, learning English should be your actual first priority. And the 3 companies that I worked at, and in the north of the 65 companies I did apply to, the official speaking language inside the company was English. So maybe this is something to consider or even think about. Also, in a country like Austria, where you need to accumulate a certain number of points to get a residence permit or a work permit, we will talk about that more in the next section, you get a lot of extra points if you can prove your English level. And you even get more points as your English level goes higher and higher. Now let's talk about the technical skills. And let's be honest here. The main requirement or the main motivation motivation for a software company to want to hire you as a software engineer and bring you all the way from abroad is basically your technical skills. Yes, English is a prerequisite, we just established that, but technical proficiency is the main deciding factor that will either push the company towards extending an offer or push them towards rejecting your application. There is a ton of resources online on how to get started, and I actually made a video about that too. I'll link it up here or here, so I won't go into much details about that. But the basic gist is that you need to develop your coding skills enough for the company to be convinced that you will not only help improve their product, but you will also make them money. And you can convince them through your performance in these interviews. On a high level, if you don't feel like you're there yet, what you need to do is to, number one, figure out the specific requirements that the company you want to apply to is asking for and work on these specific skills. Also, it is important to note that there is usually a subset of common requirements amongst all the roles that you will likely want to apply to. And so if you start working on that role requirements for a specific company and for whatever reason you don't pass the interviews, there is a lot of knowledge areas that will leak into the preparation of other similar roles as well. As an example, if you're applying for a back-end role, you probably will need to know things like SQL, database stuff, REST APIs, and so on. And usually these requirements are common amongst all back-end software engineer roles. So my advice is don't get discouraged if you don't get the role that you spent a while preparing for, and just keep on applying. Number two is that you need to prepare yourself for the coding interview. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but I have already made a video about that too, so check it out if you're interested. But your interviews will basically involve either a cocktail or one of the following. It's either going to be like language specific interview questions, like for example, what is a global interpreter log in Python? And or lead code style questions like code out a Fibonacci sequence, and or they will give you like some task that you will take home and complete within a specific time frame, and push your code incrementally into a repository like GitHub, and then they make their decision based on things like your documentation, your thinking process, your tests, and so on. You are either already good at these or you will become good at them through repetition, so don't get discouraged if things don't work out right away. Now, let's talk about the culture fit. Finally, this personal skills and culture fit is usually the last stage of all your interviews. Before companies extend you an offer, they want to ensure that you are the kind of candidate that will fit with the rest of the team, well, for obvious reasons. They want to make sure that you'll be a fit for the culture they have, especially if the company is really known to foster a diverse culture. And this means asking you questions to gauge how open and accepting you are of people from like different culture and different ideologies. My only advice here is to just not be a dumbass. Don't offend anyone and be accepting of everyone, even if you don't agree with their ideologies. You can disagree with other people but still accept them. That's fine. No one expects you to agree with each and every person's opinions and beliefs. This part of the interview process, in my opinion, is the easiest, and if you've made it this far, congrats, you probably will get the role if you don't. This brings us to the end of getting the job offer section. I just want to highlight my goal was to get a job right away before I leave. So I want to make this clear that this is not the only way to do this relocation process. I happen to know other people that got a student visa, for example, to study in a university in a European city, finished their studies and then transitioned into work, and obviously didn't have to go through the same process that I had to go through of the job search and the application. And of course, since they got a degree from that country, it made the job search much easier. My girlfriend actually did that. However, I'm not super familiar with the process, but if you're interested to know more about this studying thing, let me know in the comments and I'll bring her on for a video to chat about her experience. And I hope this was informative. If you still have any questions that I didn't answer, feel free to leave a comment or contact me on any of my socials. If you're on the fence on whether Vienna or Portugal life is worth it, feel free to click on either of those videos to take a sneak peek on what it's like to live there. That being said, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.